Today we're going to be looking at Machiavelli. Machiavelli is an Italian. He lives in the late 14 and early 1500s. He's most famous for his book, The Prince, which is a manual on leadership, political leadership, that he meant for Italian leaders of his time, that he hoped, if used as he meant it to be, would create a powerful Italian ruler with the ability to repel the continued European assaults on the Italian peninsula. Now keep in mind, at this time, there is no Italy. Italy is a collection of several different states containing people who speak Italian, but there is no unified country of Italy until the late 1800s. Excuse me. So this excerpt is from The Prince. The book it's from is Aspects of Western Civilization by Perry M. Rogers. Great book. Begins on page 7, so please read along with me. On those who have become princes by crime. It should be noted at this point that in securing a state by force, its conqueror should consider carefully all the harmful things he must do, and do all of them at once, so he does not have to repeat them daily. By avoiding such constant brutality, men will begin to feel secure, and the prince will gain their loyalty with the benefits he bestows on them. Any ruler who does otherwise, either because he is timid and hesitant, or because he listens to poor advice, must always keep his dagger in hand. He can never count on the support of his subjects, because their continual wounds are always fresh, and they will never feel secure in him. The prince, therefore, should inflict all injuries at the same time, for the less often they are imposed, the less they offend. Benefits, on the other hand, should be distributed in small amounts, but continually, so that they may be fully appreciated. And a prince should most importantly live with his subjects and be aware of their attitudes, that no unexpected event, whether good or bad, forces him to change plans. For when emergencies arise, you will not have time to get your subjects to respond through cruelty, and what good you might do will help you little, since they will think that circumstances forced your hand, and you will derive no thanks from it whatsoever. So what he's saying here is, if you conquer a place through criminal means, like not justifiable means under, say, just war Christian doctrine. So if you conquer a place, what you have to do is figure out all the bad things that you need to do to keep your power and do them all at once. So if you have a lot of enemies, execute them all at once. You do this because people will fairly quickly, according to the prince, forget the injuries committed on them by a ruler over time. On the other hand, the good things, the nice things that you do for your subjects, the benefits that you provide, you should do them constantly, continuously, a little bit at a time, so that there is always some benefit from you in the minds of your subjects. He goes on to say that it's very important that a prince live among his subjects, so he constantly has his hand on the pulse of their attitudes and any big changes that may be coming up, any revolutions, any disputes, protests, that sort of thing, so that he can be ready to act in advance or be ready to do something good, say, to avoid any problems that might arise. Then he says, on cruelty and mercy, a prince must always be cautious in believing too deeply or acting too overtly, but he must also never seem timid and hesitant. He should temper his actions with an eye to prudence and a human touch, so that too much trust doesn't result in foolish risk, or too little trust make him intolerable. Moderation, like the constant mean, think of Confucius. From this arises the question as to whether it is better to be loved than to be feared, or the opposite. I reply that a prince should be both, but since it is difficult to combine them, it is much safer to be feared than to be loved, when one must choose. For it is true about men that they are ungrateful and unfaithful, deceitful and two-faced, boot-licking cowards, who nevertheless are always greedy for their own gain. And while you shower them with benefits, they are all yours and will give you their blood, their property, their lives, and their children, so long as danger is remote. But when danger approaches, they turn away, and that prince who relies exclusively on their empty words rather than on finding other ways to protect himself will surely be destroyed. For any friendships that are purchased rather than funded on greatness and nobility of character are never truly owned, and you can never cash them in at the crucial time. So Machiavelli here says people are fickle, people are greedy, people are dishonest, right? And you have to behave knowing that. And so if you have to choose whether to be loved by your subjects or to be feared by your subjects, then be feared. Because love is fickle, and it will go away when danger approaches. And people will say, yeah, we got your back, when danger is far away, when they don't have to act on that. But if you're invaded, if there is a revolution and you suddenly have to count on your subjects to give up their lives, then if all they do is have loved you before, then that love is going to evaporate. Whereas if they are afraid of you and afraid of the consequences, that will still be useful to you. And you can count on them to act if they're more afraid of you than they are of the oncoming danger. Besides, men don't mind having someone who makes himself loved than one who makes himself feared, because love is held together by a bond of obligation, which, since men are basically a dismal bunch, is broken whenever their own self-interest is threatened. But fear always holds the bond tightly, because the dread of punishment never leaves them. A prince, however, must make himself feared in such a way that, even if he has not won the affection of his people, he has avoided their hatred. For being feared yet not hated is a good combination. If the prince keeps his hands off the property and the women of his subjects, and if he must execute someone, then be sure to do so only when there is a manifest cause and proper justification for it. But above all, he should avoid taking the property of others, for men will soon forget the death of their fathers than the loss of their inheritance. Moreover, there will never be any lack of reason for taking people's property, and a prince who begins to live by stealing will always find excuses for confiscating property. On the other hand, it is not as easy to find reasons for taking a life, and these justifications dissipate more quickly. To come back to the question now of whether it is to be loved or feared, I conclude that since men love at their own pleasure and fear at the pleasure of the prince, a wise prince should always rely on himself, not on the will of others. But above all, he should strive only to avoid hatred, as I've already noted. Interesting thing in here, one, avoid being hated above all things. That'll help prevent revolutions, make it more likely for people to fight for you if need be. But he says, above all, don't take people's property. People care about their property more than they care about their loved ones. And this makes sense because, everybody dies. People die all the time, and particularly back in the day, there's all kinds of things that could kill you, infection, disease, that sort of stuff. But people's property represented the future of their whole family line. That was the inheritance. And if people lost their property, you were destroying the future of a person's sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters, etc., 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 all down into eternity. So never take people's property, right? And he also says that princes who do that keep doing it, right? And so you don't even want to start down that road. How a prince should keep his word. It must be evident to everyone that it is more commendable for a prince to keep his word at all times and practice integrity rather than live by deceit. And yet, the experience of our times has shown that the princes who have achieved great things have not cared much for keeping promises, but have been expert at manipulating the minds of others. In the end, they have surpassed those rulers whose actions were dictated by loyalty and honesty. Therefore, you must know that there are two ways of fighting, one according to the laws, the other by force. Men practice the first way and animals the second. But because the first is often insufficient, it becomes necessary to resort to the second. A prince, then, must know how to use both the natures of the beast and of the man. Since it is necessary for a prince to know how to make good use of the nature of the beast, he should choose from among animals the fox and the lion. For the lion cannot defend itself from traps, and the fox cannot protect itself from wolves. A prince should be a fox in order to recognize the traps laid for him, and a lion in order to frighten the wolves. Those who simply employ the nature of the lion do not understand their business. A wise ruler, therefore, cannot and should not keep his word when it is at his disadvantage or when the reasons that made him promise no longer exist. And if men were all good, this rule would be wrong. But since men are basically bad and will not keep their promises to you, you likewise need not keep your promises to them. A prince never lacks legitimate legitimate reasons to break his promises. I could offer an infinite number of modern examples that demonstrate this and show how many peace treaties, how many promises have been made null and void by the infidelity of princes. And the ruler who knows best how to play the fox has always been the most successful. But a prince must also know how to disguise this nature well and to be a great hypocrite and a bold liar. For men are so simple and so controlled by their immediate needs that the deceiver will always find a dupe who will allow himself to be deceived. So essentially, everybody lies. Men are selfish, interested in their own self-interest, and particularly princes, particularly powerful people. So if you're a prince, you're going to be in league with a whole bunch of people who will lie to you and use you to your own benefit. So it's foolhardy to try to be honest all the time. You will end up losing your power, losing your kingdom, chaos will come out, and nobody will benefit. So lie when you need to. It is not necessary for a ruler to possess all the qualities mentioned above, but it is essential that he should at least seem to have them. A prince, therefore, must appear to be all mercy, all faithfulness, all integrity, all kindness, all religion. And it is most necessary for the prince to seem to possess this last quality, since men in general judge more by what they see and hear than by what they feel. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few perceive what you are. And those few do not dare to contradict the opinion of the many who are protected by the majesty of the state. For the actions of all men, and especially those princes where there is no other arbiter, are judged by the final result. A prince, therefore, should boldly seize and maintain his state. His methods will always be judged honorable and will be praised by everyone, for ordinary people are always deceived by appearances and by results. And in the world, there is nothing but ordinary people. So what do people care about? Results. Excuse me. They don't necessarily care how you got the results, as long as they're good results. And so this is where Machiavelli's famous idea, the end justifies the means. If you achieve your goal, people aren't going to care how you got there. And the most important thing is to achieve that goal. Right? Be a strong prince. Hold on to your power. And then you can worry about doing good. Right? Machiavelli is demonized throughout history right up until today because he was one of the first people to actually write down at a time where pretty much everybody was Catholic that princes shouldn't act like Jesus. Most princes didn't act like Jesus, but Machiavelli's the first guy who comes right out and says, don't do it. If you act kind and are honest all the time, you're going to wind up dead and your people are not going to be better off. Questions?